Hey y'all, so today I'm going to be talking about underrated books, and I am doing this as a part of the monthly recommendations group on Goodreads, so I will leave a link down in the description to that group. So I feel like there are two different directions I could take the topic of underrated books. On the one hand, I could talk about books that are pretty well known, that I liked, that most people don't like or feel ambivalent about. And on the other hand, I could talk about books that I feel like not enough people know about and that I really enjoyed. And I'm going to be taking it the latter direction. So I'm going to be talking about books that I feel like a lot of people don't know about or aren't talked about a lot on BookTube, but I really enjoyed. And I figured that the best way to start out this list is with the underrated series that I cannot stop talking about, and that is the Pendragon Series by DJ McHale. I feel like anytime the topic of a book that is underrated or not incredibly well known comes up, this is the first thing I think of because I have loved this series since junior high. And I only know of one or two booktubers that have even mentioned this series or own a book in this series, let alone have read the series. And I feel like people who love Harry Potter will also really enjoy the Pendragon series. Now, they're not alike in many ways, but they do contain the same thread of a young boy forced into a magical, fantastical world that he hadn't heard of, who kind of becomes the hero of the story and is battling this villain across several books. But there isn't any magic in the series per se, but Bobby, the main character, is a traveler, which means that he can travel between alternate dimensions, which are called territories in the series. And this is just a really awesome series with some great world building in all of the territories that Bobby visits, and I just love this series so much. I wish more people would read it. I know that it's 10 books long, but honestly the first few books are like 300 pages long, and it's not that hard to get through them. They're pretty quick reads, and I love this series so much, and I want more people to read it. Another series that I consider to be incredibly underrated is the Ascendance Trilogy by Jennifer A. Nielsen. This is just a really fun, fast-paced middle grade fantasy trilogy with a super awesome protagonist named Sage. Sage is just a really crafty, snarky 12-year-old, and it's so much fun to read from his point of view and to follow him on his adventures throughout this trilogy. Now, I have seen a handful of booktubers talk about this, namely Becca Awesome Booknut, Jeff from Ermagerd Books, and Lindsay from Lindsay Ray. But other than that, this trilogy isn't really talked about on BookTube, and it's really good. All three books are really quick reads, they're really fast-paced, really exciting, and I just loved this trilogy. Next up is actually an author instead of a specific book, and that is Beth Revis. Now, Beth Revis's Across the Universe trilogy is fairly well known on BookTube. The only big booktuber that I know who has actually read it is Kat from Katie-tastic, but I feel like it's a series that most people are aware exists. However, her standalone novel, The Body Electric, is incredibly under the radar. Last time I checked, this book had less than 1,000 ratings on Goodreads. Not even reviews, ratings. And I feel like the Across the Universe trilogy is far and away much better than many of the big, well-known trilogies that circulate around BookTube all the time. Seriously, if you are a fan of like sci-fi or dystopian, especially a combination of the two, definitely check out Beth Revis. These books are amazing. I love her writing style. She is so underrated, and I cannot wait to see what she publishes next. Next up is one of the lesser talked about books by a very, very popular, well-known author, and that is The Therithmatist by Brandon Sanderson. Now, this is obviously not an unknown book, but I do feel that out of the Brandon Sanderson books that are published, this one is kind of the one that gets the least attention. It often gets overshadowed by the Mistborn trilogy or the Stormlight Archive or Elantris or Warbreaker, but I feel like this is a really solid book. And while yes, I definitely did prefer the Mistborn trilogy to the Therithmatist, I feel like this is possibly the fastest that I've ever gotten invested in a magic system or in characters, because this book is like 350 pages long. It's less than 450 pages, and I got incredibly invested in the world and the characters and the magic system, and that typically doesn't happen for me in such a short book. So yeah, while I do prefer the Mistborn trilogy, I feel like Therithmatist deserves a lot more attention than it gets. Next up is Night Film by Marisha Pessl. Now, I have seen a couple people buy this book or show it in a book haul, but the only booktuber that I know of besides myself that has actually read it is Reagan from Peru's Project. And I feel like this book definitely deserves more attention because I am not one to get scared or freaked out easily. As I've said in the past, I love watching horror movies. I often watch them with my friends just to see them get scared. Like, they don't affect me at all. But I had an overwhelming sense of paranoia during the days that I was reading this book. Like, I was freaked out. For example, in the dorm I was living in over the summer, they turned half the lights off in the hallway after like 10 p.m. and I didn't have a bathroom attached to my room, so I had to walk down to the hall bathroom. And it was the creepiest thing to like walk down the hall. Normally I just walk down, walk back, not a big deal. But I was incredibly paranoid, freaked out that like someone was behind me. It was creepy. Night Film just constantly keeps you paranoid and on your toes, and I thought that it was a really great read. Next up is The Night We Said Yes by Lauren Gibaldi. I read this quite recently during the Booktubeathon, and I surprisingly really enjoyed it. And I say surprisingly because contemporary typically isn't my genre. Lately I've been really enjoying it, but in general it's not necessarily my thing. And I typically don't enjoy in books when teenagers do typical stupid teenagery things like running from the cops, doing things that would get them in legal trouble, stuff like that. But I just thought that this was a lot of fun and I really enjoyed it. Now granted, it does have a lot of like punk rock references in there, which is something that I really love, so it connected with me deeper than it would with someone who doesn't really enjoy that genre of music, but I personally really love this and it was a pretty good read. And even though it was released pretty recently, it hasn't really gotten much attention on BookTube. Before I got this in my Owl Crate box, I had heard like one person mention it, but that was it. And I feel like this just deserves a little bit more attention. Like I said, it's not amazing. I gave it 8.5 out of 10, but I just really enjoyed it. It was fun. I think it's a great light read. And finally, the book that I've owned longer than any other book on my shelves, yes, including the Harry Potter books, is All American Girl by Meg Cabot. Now, I'm not exactly sure how underrated this book actually is because it is like 13-ish years old, so I'm sure that it was pretty popular when it was released, but this is just one that I've literally never seen on BookTube, and it is a long-standing favorite of mine. Now, I read this for the first time over 10 years ago, so I wasn't exactly reading it critically, and it's been quite a while since the last time I read it, but I've read it so many times that I remember it pretty vividly, and it's just a really fun, light read. Like with The Night We Said Yes, this isn't exactly groundbreaking, and I don't know if I would enjoy it so much if I read it for the first time as a 21-year-old. But for me, this is really nostalgic. It's one that I really love, and it's not talked about on BookTube at all. So I just wanted to mention this one and get it a little bit less underrated. So that is it for my list of underrated books. I do definitely plan to continue participating in the monthly recommendations group, and so you will see more videos about this on my channel every month. In the future, the group does plan on doing the videos during the first week of every month, so you will see the next one pretty soon. Let me know down in the comments what books you consider to be underrated, and if you've read any of the books that I talked about in this video. As always, I will leave links down in the description to my blog, Twitter, and Goodreads. Please add me as a friend on Goodreads. I would love to be friends with all of you. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!